Hello, everyone, and welcome to another of our wonderful musical jewel boxes. I'm joined this week by violin soloist Francisco Fullana, who last was with us last season, but we look forward to welcoming him back in future seasons and catching up with how he has been staying healthy and busy and active during the pandemic, and seeing what kind of musical selections that he also has in store for us today. So, Francisco, let's bring you in here and say hello.
Hello, everybody. How's it going? Thank you for having me.
We're so glad to have you back. So remind us, when was the last time you were here with us?
I want to say it was November of 2019, I believe, if I'm correct.
That sounds correct to me.
Yeah, we did Beethoven Concerto, which with Maestro Brose, and I mean playing that piece in Kimmel with such a great orchestra with friends in the orchestra was an incredibly memorable experience. Every time that we get to play as violinists play Beethoven Concerto, it's a journey when you're preparing for it and when you're on stage with it, and it really, it's something you never forget, no matter how many times you play it.
Well, you were certainly a favorite among several of our audience members, so we're very much looking forward to whenever we can bring you back to Philadelphia with us. And we're so glad that you were able to join us in the musical jewel box, even if you're not one of our soloists this season. So thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Oh, thank you for asking. This is exciting.
We did start off our broadcast here with some Piazzolla that you were playing, and we'll talk a little bit about the Piazzolla all encompassed a little later. But for now, what has been keeping you busy during the pandemic? Because we do have another musical selection coming up that
Yes.
You did quite a bit of work in putting together.
Yes, I feel like that was my COVID project. We've all had some kind of project. I had two of them, one musical, one non-musical. My non-musical ones was to pick up road biking and to, get stronger and climb a bunch of mountains. And so I've been doing that. And in terms of my music, since, fortunately, concerts are, their live concerts are not really happening, I decided to I was like, how can I, what could be the most helpful, most fun for me to do? And I've been obsessing over Mozart violin sonatas, violin and piano sonatas, but I didn't have anybody to play it with, so I decided, well, one way that I can, first of all, make something pretty cool that will probably be interesting for somebody else to listen to, but also for me to kind of really understand the pieces, is to arrange the piano parts and play them also on violin, and then record myself with myself. You will see it in a second, but basically I created this 3 or 4 multi-track video and audio kind of collages, or like putting them together, and yeah, just played chamber music with myself, which is an interesting experience.
And then you only have yourself to blame if somebody starts dragging or playing out of tune, which is
Oh
really
yeah,
the
and
fun
trust
of
me,
multi-track
it
process.
happens. Trust me. It's funny because the most important part was I felt like I had to really be careful of selecting which voice I wanted to record first. And because if you record only the kind of like the rhythmic parts, then everything becomes very straight and very, kind of like straightjacket. But then if there's certain places that you're doing the melody that if you don't have that motor underneath, you go off track a little too much. So, it's always a balancing game.
Yeah, well then we can dive right into listening to it, and then we'll talk a little bit about the background of this work after we hear the first movement. So this is going to be Mozart's 32nd violin sonata, I believe, K454. And so we'll hear the first movement starring Francisco Fullana and Francisco Fullana and Francisco Fullana. Well, how fun was that? And I see what you mean by needing to record some of the tracks before as opposed to after, because I think you're playing the melody and then you recorded the accompaniment along with the melody just based on the AirPods that were in your ear on the
Oh, I was gonna say, so
tracks.
you know this. Yes. Yeah, that's yeah, mostly the melody because I really felt whenever I recorded just the accompaniment, it would just become so straight and it's kind of boring. So, I was trying to be very rhythmical inside while trying to be expressive and, use the melody to kind of give the freedom that a live performance would have.
Hmm. Well, it certainly worked. I would like to hear more of these sonatas like this. I think you should take it on tour. Just
Yeah,
you
I've been to
and
Florida. I've
big
been
HD
to
TV
Florida.
screens.
Yeah, I wish I could do like a loop pedal of it or something, but it is quite it's a to do it in one shot it would be pretty scary.
Well, music is scary, so I guess that's just our life. But so tell us a little bit about the background of this particular sonata. I mean, there's plenty of violin sonatas, but this one has a couple fun stories about it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is I feel like a lot of people would consider it the crown jewel of his violin and piano sonatas, uh, and which is kind of funny the way it started, because he was rushing to finish it. He was writing it for the commissioner, who was the violinist. She was an amateur violinist named Regina, and they were supposed to premiere it in front of the emperor, and he just kept delaying it and never finishing it. And finally, the day before the concert, he gave her the violin part, just the violin part. They rehearsed it once, and then the next day played it at the concert in front of the emperor. And Mozart didn't have music in front of him, so he put just a blank sheet of paper, pretending to look at it. And the emperor picked up on it, and apparently, according to Mozart's wife's memoirs, was incredibly mad about it. So it's funny that something that was so put together so last minute that his genius just kind of drove it through and was way probably his best violin and piano sonata.
Well, this is a very famous violin sonata, and it's also a really good example of Mozart's mature violin sonatas, as they say. What would you say separates his mature violin writing from his early writing, particularly in his chamber music here with the
Yeah, I mean,
cooperating with the piano?
exactly. Yeah, so it's very interesting how in only just a few years, I mean, you're talking, the difference between this one, the B flat, the 454, and some of his earlier, like for example, the G major 301, which is very well known as well. It's only, I think it's 5 or 6 years in between, and but the writing is completely different. The earlier ones were very piano centric, and it was basically a piano sonata with just a tiny little bit of violin accompaniment, a few exchanges of the melody, but whenever I program those, I always feel bad for the pianists because they have to work really hard, and I'm basically just coasting. Just as long as you have a great pianist, it's gonna sound good. But then as you move along, a couple years later, like for example, the 377, the F major, they then become bigger in size, bigger in sonority, and he starts giving a much bigger role to the violin. Moving forward, the 454, the one you just heard, it's really much more complete. It's much more an equal partnership between the two instruments, and he it really kind of anticipates the way Beethoven would write sonatas a little bit later, and really makes you wonder if he didn't pass away so young, how far he would have taken the virtuosity, the technical requirements of both parts, and then the complexity of going just the dialogues and the way just the mastery that he had, right? Of in any chamber music piece of those dialogues and conversations between the instruments.
It I was just for briefly I was imagining and entertaining myself thinking about Mozart inventing serialism 100 years before it actually happened, but perhaps that's a bit too much to hope for that he would take
Like
up
if you look
debate.
at Beethoven, right? I mean, it's not that far in terms of he would have easily been alive if he didn't get sick, and he definitely would have gone in that kind of direction with just the complexity of it. Really, it would have been amazing to see his incredible ability to create that simplicity and to really distill everything down to the essence, but then also at the same time incorporate the complexity of harmonies and different keys and different ways that a couple decades later Beethoven had. So it would have been fascinating to see the development, but we'll never know.
No, but we do at least have the ability to interact with composers who have been long dead in interesting ways and update them into contemporary harmonic languages and idioms, which is, of course, my perhaps not so subtle segue into our
Nice
next
segue, nice
question,
segue.
where we opened up with you playing a bit of Piazzolla's Four Seasons, which was this spring, I think it was, that you were playing. But you also just finished a CD of Four Seasons. But the CD Four Seasons you did were not the Piazzolla, but a pairing of the classic Vivaldi with the newly recomposed version of Vivaldi's Four Seasons by Max Richter. Could you give us some background on that project?
Of course, yeah. I mean, it was very exciting to be able to record it. I went to England with the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, and they were just awesome. And just a beautiful hall they have out there, and just having a small orchestra, right? It's only for the Four Seasons, it might be for like 20, 22 musicians. So to have all the principals just like get to work, and it was a very intense few days, and we had a lot of fun doing it. But yeah, the Richter is a very interesting. Fascinating piece that he comes from this almost, I would say, minimalist. He's written some music for films. He definitely has definitely a lot of minimalism in all his music, but in this case, he wanted to pay a bit of an homage to Vivaldi's amazing masterpiece that everybody knows, and he decided to take this elements and this melodies of rhythms and motives and still keep the same structure of the Four Seasons, the four concertos of three movements each, and then each one of them is completely different. So for example, a couple of the slow movements are basically exactly the same as the Vivaldi's, but then if you go, I always say that has the structure of like a bookend where the first movement and the last of spring and the last movement of winter are pretty much just Max Richter's music. I mean, he just takes a couple of the elements of the da 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 the famous part in the beginning of Spring, and just starts looping it, and everybody in the orchestra becomes their own soloist. They have their own part, and it kind of in this continuous dialogue, it almost creates this feeling of birds. I mean, I would say like to me, the image I always have when I think of it is like I started with the concertmaster. It's just two little birds singing and trying to imitate each other, and then just basically by the end of the piece, at the end of the movement, it's a whole forest of just screaming birds. Yeah, it's very very cool the way he kind of pushes and pulls on the tradition and on the music of Vivaldi.
Yeah, and just for our friends at home who might want, since we don't have a string orchestra with us here to actually play all of that, what is the name of this CD so people can go find it for themselves?
Sure. Through the lens of time. If you look up my name, it's on Amazon and of course on Spotify and Apple Music, and it's under the label is called Orchid Classics.
Fabulous. I would say I can't wait to listen to it, but I have to admit I already have, and I love it. So I'm already number one fan here. Everyone else has to get in line behind me. So just give us a little bit then about the Piazzolla, which is a completely different kind of piece, which is one that our subscribers have heard. I think we did it last in 2016, I want to say, and it is a Four Seasons, but it certainly doesn't have as much in common with the Vivaldi and the Richter.
No, I mean I think Piazzolla, of course, he has such a particular language, right? I mean, if you hear one piece by him, like it's just once you kind of know what he sounds like, you will definitely hear that it's Piazzolla, no matter what other pieces there are out there. So the Four Seasons of Buenos Aires, he had written it as similar idea of Richter, kind of paying homage to Vivaldi, but in this case it was for his tango band, and it's a very very much tango oriented, very very fun, very edgy, and very small little bits here and there you can hear a couple of the motives of the melodies of Vivaldi, but otherwise it's just mainly Piazzolla. So then a little bit later, about, I want to say it's about 10, 15 years ago, maybe even a little longer, Guido Kramer, the fantastic legendary violinist, commissioned a composer to kind of incorporate this tango version of Piazzolla's Four Seasons and write it out for string orchestra and soloist. And it's become such a popular piece, which is very exciting because it's really fun to play. And whenever I've performed it, it's a blast. So, and I think for the audience as well. I think for both, people on stage and in front of stage.
Well, if we're not going to be allowed to be inside, perhaps we'll just have to have a whole tango festival, and
Oh
we'll
yeah.
all dance. We'll all dance in the streets of Buenos Aires, with
So you don't want to see me dancing.
keeping us safe.
I'll just play the violin.
Okay, I'll take care of the dancing, and Maestro
Okay.
Brate will take care of the dancing. We will do a tango for everyone. It'll be fun.
Wow. Okay. That sounds exciting.
Well, great. Okay, so let's pull into. We have one last recording that we can close off our time together with, and it is a violinist special, a Spanish virtuoso composer that people who aren't violinists aren't always familiar with. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. He's my countryman. I'm originally from Spain, and Pablo de Sarasate is I would say, our leading figure in violin playing and violin in Spain. So he was, most active around the last few decades of the 19th century. He passed away in 1900. I want to say oh 08 or 09. And there's actually a recording of him playing this piece and a couple others from 1904 in this wax LP, wax record that you can barely hear it. But it's out there. I think it might even be on YouTube. So I recommend checking it out because it's really interesting to hear. And he was famous for this beautiful sound and very much like a delicacy to him as a performer. But then as a as a composer, he was incredibly influenced by the Spanish folklore and incorporating it to his recitals. To really bring, he was touring all over the world, and he really wanted to bring some of the Spanish traditional music to audiences, that had never heard it before. So in this case, Andalusian Romanza Andaluza, is one of his most lyrical pieces, and it was the very first piece I ever learned from him. So I have very fond memories of playing this in my first competition I ever won when I was 9 years old, and then I even played this piece on his violin. He is the Stradivari violin that the Conservatory of Madrid has as well. And so, I did a couple of recitals there, playing on this incredible instrument, and it was really fun to play his own music on it. So.
Well, fabulous. It's a whiz banger of a good time to talk to you again, and also to listen to all this incredible music from you. And so we hope that you'll be able to join us again in future seasons, maybe with some Vivaldi or something like that.
After the concert.
Exactly. As long as we go to Monks, it's the only thing that holds our organization together. But good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, Francisco. And thanks everyone at home for again coming back for the musical JewelBox. This is where I remind everyone, of course, you can support everything to do with our orchestra, musical JewelBox, our future concerts. The entire history of classical music rests on your shoulders just by going to chamberorchestra.org, and then you find the donate button in the top right corner. So without further ado, let's listen to the Sarasate Romanza Andaluza.